Alright guys, here is my final presentation for Western Civ, how innovative use of technology won the Battle of Agincourt. In it, we're going to be discussing my main argument that the English victory at the Battle of Agincourt was only possible because of the innovative use of existing technology by Henry V and his forces. However, we're going to need to set up some information before we can look at that argument. And that information includes what and why was Agincourt, and some of the French and English equipment and tactics for this battle. And finally, we're going to look at how Henry V shook things up in order to win. So, Agincourt is one of the most famous battles in the Middle Ages, obviously on October 25th, 1415, as you can see. We have the English invading northern France just across the Channel and going on this long campaign all the way to Calais, which was one of the more important port towns in English-controlled France. And this is a battle made most famous by the Shakespearean play Henry V. Now, this mainly happened because the French people decided that they weren't going to be paying tribute to the English crown anymore. And so, obviously, King Henry was not very happy with that, so he led a small army through northern France in order to, force them into paying tribute. So the battlefield was actually pretty interesting. We have two different forests flanking a pretty marshy field, with the forests of Agincourt as what the battlefield would be called, and Tramecourt, just, two forests. However, because of the narrow nature of this battlefield, there had to be special tactics designed for it. A great instance is the French. Their typical battle plan consisted of having a central body of men-at-arms, which is essentially a term meaning medieval melee soldiers, your people with swords or cavalry, knights, those guys. And then you have a large wing of crossbowmen in front. However, because it was so narrow, they had to change their strategy, so that the cavalry would charge the English from the front, and the crossbowmen were just deemed unnecessary and kind of superfluous, so they were relegated to the back. Now, French equipment, your typical medieval fare, longswords, polearms sometimes, especially for the mounted men-at-arms. Got your typical chainmail or plate mail armor. Crossbowmen, you've probably seen pictures of these guys before with their brimmed steel hats and nice big crossbows. However, medieval French crossbows were pretty slow and could only fire up to 3 bolts a minute, meaning that there was a serious bottleneck on their firepower. Now, English tactics, they had very, very few men compared to the French, and this actually, their choosing of a narrow battlefield kind of mitigated this issue, especially when they put their world-renowned archers inside the woods in order to attack any of the French people that would come through the middle and catch them by surprise. Now, English equipment, men-at-arms were honestly pretty similar from country to country, but archers, longbowmen, were very unique to England and the UK. At this time, they had a very large longbow, and their archers typically had light armor, carried a bunch of arrows. And the English longbow was very special for being long and thick, requiring a lot of force to draw, which put logically a lot of force behind the string and behind the arrow. And also because the arrows were heavier and longer, they could go further and it would have much more force due to, Newton's first law of motion. Now, Henry used longbows here very differently than he normally would. Normally, you would see organized lines of archers in front of your men-at-arms, and that would move behind when the enemy line approached. However, Henry decided to go for a more guerrilla tactic in putting his archers in the woods and relied very, very heavily on these longbowmen. We're seeing over 80% of his forces were archers, which is very unprecedented, especially for this time. And I would argue this is one of the first instances we see of ranged weaponry truly taking over melee, and where we begin to see more modern forms of warfare like in the American Revolution. So, in conclusion, Henry V's creative and innovative use of longbows at Agincourt was not just an important part of the English victory, but was very vital to their success. Essentially saying the longbow was a very powerful technology that had been used many times before, but it took innovation and clear new thinking in order to breed success like this. So, and that would be it. Thank you for watching.